All right, and welcome to the walkthrough to the RESTful CRUD exercise for creating RESTful routes and queries. At the beginning of this, we're creating just the environment and setting everything up. Basically, I coded this all, and I'm recording the audio post-coding, so we can just talk about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and how things are going. The basic idea here is that we're going to create the CRUD routes. Create, read all, read one, update, and delete. And for update, I did an extra one, and I did both the put, the update atomically, and also patch, update one. So the biggest thing to realize is that when you create this, when you download the repo and you set it up, you can't start the server right away. You have to do npm install to download everything that you need. Then we need to install, create the database. Now, I already previously had the database from when we set up. So I just dropped the database and recreated it. Then we run the migrations and the seeds. Now, something I always like to do whenever I have this set up for myself initially is go into PSQL and verify what kind of data is there. Because this database was not created by me, I wanted to know what kind of data am I working with? Am I working with more than one table, less than one table? I didn't actually look at the migrations and seeds, so I'm just going to go straight into PSQL and take a look there. And here we see, okay, there's only one table here, so I'm not going to need any joins or anything else like that. And there's only three things. And I can now tell, okay, title, year, and network. This is going to be, it's not going to be overly complicated. Now, the next thing I want to look at is what route am I looking at here? And where are the files that I really need? Now, I know the instructions say it's going to be in routes cartoons, but I did want to really quickly double check with the source code. And so taking a look in here, I'm seeing, okay, if I want to do this, I'm going to have to potentially have the query existing first. So normally I do write the code first and then write the queries to support the code. But I decided that this is simple enough. I was able to think about what I needed. And with the query written, I'm able to come back to the routes and bring in the queries and then create the get all route. I decided to call this the variable db instead of connects because I didn't want this router file to have any knowledge about what kind of database we're working with. It just runs these routes, and if we decide to change the queries file to use something completely different, like MongoDB or MySQL, something that's not even connects, this routes file won't change at all. It'll be exactly the same. One fun fact about connects is that if you forget or do not have the .then running, it won't run the query at all. It will just sit there and just ignore everything. Now that comes back a little bit later on the insert when I make a small mistake, which takes a little bit of time to debug, but we'll get there later. Now one thing, notice how I'm using a .catch on this .then. That way, if there is an error, it's going to be passed to the next function, which is an error handler that Express has, and it will handle any errors that we get. So I decided to come back in here and just really quickly double check what is the route we're going to use. Localhost, I know it's going to be localhost. I know it's going to be /API/cartoons. And here I come into the bin www directory where the app.listen is to find out what the port I'm looking for. Now it looks like I've already had a GET request set up for localhost :3000 API cartoons. I run it and I get all the cartoons. So time for me to git commit and send this on up. Now in this case, I'm going to be writing this for a second solutions branch. The first one was written by Roberto, and this second one is going to be written by me. Moving on, it's time to move on to the next route, which is going to be the get one. One of the things about REST is that we use the HTTP verb, so get, to have some meaning for us, well, retrieve. But then we're also going to use the URL for information as well. So, well, get slash API/cartoon slash, and then the ID that we want to get. So if we send a GET request to there, we know that we want to retrieve a single item. Now in this case, anything inside of the URL itself, that's a route parameter. And I can grab that off of Express with rec.params.id. So I just call the get1 function, which this time I'm writing before I actually go over to the queries file and write there. I'm going to pass it the ID, and then the .then and .catch look exactly the same as the getAll. Although note that I named the variable coming back as cartoon instead of cartoons because I'm only getting one of them. Now one thing that I missed that I'm noticing now is that I just do the same return db select star from cartoon where ID matches the ID. What I don't do is use the first function in here, which would return an actually only single one. So when we see this come back, we're actually going to see it returns an array of one item instead of just a single object, which actually is a problem. I'm going to go in later on and fix that in the code, but that's something to be aware of, is that that returned an array and not an object. Let's move on to the create. This one causes me a little bit of trouble here. Now, not this side. The router that I create here is perfectly fine. Everything here is as it should be. Now notice we are doing this on a slash, and that's because in REST, a post to just API cartoons, that's just telling us, hey, I want to add a new cartoon. Don't worry, I'll be sending the data in rec.body. Now I'm not doing any validation here, so I'm not checking to see if whatever's passed into rec.body is correct. I'm just passing it along, and then the query is going to put it into the database. Now finally, I'm also going to say, you know what? We're not going to get anything valuable back from the database, so I'm just going to send the status itself back. I'm not going to send any message back. So just the 201. Now in this create function, I do have a full problem that I run into. And I'll let you try to spot the problem before I figure it out, which is a few minutes in. Now this is a completely unrelated problem. And one thing I've noticed in troubleshooting is that if you end up running into a bug, but you have a second bug, that just fixing that first one may actually make you feel that, oh, I'm done. I've got everything set up. But that's still not the case here. I still have a very big problem. But because it's JavaScript, it's not actually going to tell me. So I spent some time actually trying to figure out what the appropriate data set in here. I didn't want to just make up a year like I had in there. For Inspector Gadget, I want to find out like what year did it actually release. Of course, this is a test database that's on my own system. Nobody else is going to see it except, of course, you guys watching this video. I didn't have to do this, but I was actually curious. Turns out, 1983. Now I did go try to find what network it resolved on, but I couldn't quickly find that. So I just ended up saying, oh yeah, DIC Entertainment. That's the network, even though those were the makers. It's actually really interesting how easy it is to get pulled off track onto tangents while programming things, especially since the internet is so vast and there's so much interesting information. I definitely felt a pull to go off on a major tangent and just sort of research this and find more about it. But I didn't really have the time. So I put DIC Entertainment in there and hit send, expecting everything will work out just fine. Now there were a few times in here where I had a little bit of tea. I wanted to send things off. Now the first problem I ran into is just in Postman. I was sending it to /API/cartoon/1, but my post is set for just slash, so or /API/cartoons. Then I get this 500 error. Now 500 errors indicate internal server error. It's the server's problem, not the client's problem. So I know it's not Postman. It's something either in my server or inside of Express or inside of the database. So as soon as I got that error, I went to the database itself to check what's going on. Did it actually add into the database? But it didn't. So then I decided, okay, well maybe I screwed up and I need to use the .table method, which I have used before and I verified it works. So I decided, you know what? Let me try that to see whether or not that works properly. Still 500 internal error. Have you spotted the error yet? Also notice that there's that error route where I'm passing to next. It's not getting anything, which means that that code's not being run. Now next is I attempt to put a console log into the post, but I chose the wrong line of code. And so I end up putting this console log in one of the gets. So that didn't work either. Now I do find this out pretty quickly when I go back and realize, like, hey, what am I doing? It shouldn't be in there. So I'll go on and put it on the post appropriately, but the problem isn't with this file. Since next is not being called, none of the code that I put in here is going to be called. Now the reason why I ended up writing that code there was because I didn't trust that the next was doing the right thing. But the problem is something else. The problem is back in that queries file. Now I'm just going off of memory. I haven't re-watched this yet. This is I'm watching it through for the first time and adding my commentary. My next step was to, am I getting the data? Maybe I was like not putting in data at all. But I was getting that just fine. So what I move in next is I put in a .then here inside of the query just to console log what was coming back from the database. Like, was it saying inserted? But the thing is that's really interesting, I get that inserted message back here. But when I didn't have the .then, I don't get it back inside of the route. And there's that command insert row count 1 that lets me know something new is in the database now. And I immediately go check, and there it is. Now the problem is if you do not have the .then attached, it won't run at all. And that's what was happening. It didn't have the .then. Now the reason why it didn't have the .then, on line 16, I don't have a return statement. So therefore, it returns undefined to the route when I call it, which means these .then starting in line 25 never run at all. So all of this debug I'm trying to do to figure it out, it's slowly building a picture in my mind of what's going on. And eventually I do find, oh man, I'm not getting anything. I'm not, like, the .thens just aren't running at all. Now notice one method that I have of debugging is I make one change and then I test it. I check to see, has it worked? Or have I gotten any different feedback? Now the reason why I do a single change and then I check is because I don't want to make any assumptions about, like, which change it is that I did worked. If I try two different things, like if I change 2 lines of code and then I test it, I won't know which one is appropriate and I still have debugging to do. But if I'm only changing one thing at a time and then I go on from there, then I know, okay, I got it. Now, because I have that .then in there again, it's still inserting properly. Of course, there's the 500 error, but that's because I have undefined with a .then on it, which doesn't work. So it turns out that this 500 error, it's not coming from the database. It's coming from Express itself. It's because I'm running into an error. I'm trying to run a function off of undefined. But unfortunately, JavaScript being the way that it is, it's not telling me what the problem is. Now I figured out that I need the return. But of course, I come to the wrong file and put the return in there. I look up and I see, hey, there's no other returns here. And I realize, oh, I'm in cartoons. I need to go to the appropriate file, put the return in there. Now, I know that is going to work. I just know and have full confidence. So I remove all my debugging and stuff before I even run this because it's going to work. Now, I'm keeping the result, but I'm going to put in that res.send status. Now, also, I'm going to send the status 201 because in REST, the HTTP status code for success for creating a new element is 201. And now we get the 201 created. I go back to get the other thing, and we have now 3 inspector gadgets inside of the database. So when I was coding this, after that nice little problem, I just continued on. I didn't feel that frustrated with it. I mean, just enough to sort of shake my head and sigh in exasperation. It's a simple error, but it's one that happens all the time. Forgetting the keyword, the return, you got the implied return. And unfortunately, it just happens. But it's happened enough to me that it doesn't really bother me. I just move on to the next thing. On to the atomic update. So a put route in REST, the idea is that you're going to replace the entire object. Everything that is passed in is going in there. Now to do a proper put update, I would also have to check to see if rec.body had everything that I wanted to have. For example, the title, the name, and the year must all be in there because every single one is going to be updated, and if I didn't have it in, it should remove it. But I'm not properly doing that completely. I'm just using the update, which in Connects for Postgres is not an atomic update, but rather a sort of laser-focused update. It's just going to update the things that it finds. Now, I did go in and I noticed as soon as I went in there, oh yeah, I need the ID because we're updating a very specific cartoon here. We can't just update all of them. Now our connects queries have gotten a little bit more complicated, but not that much more. Instead of select, we're just using the update keyword. So I look at my results and I see, okay, I'm going to target ID1, Bugs Bunny, and I'm going to change the year. So instead of 1969, let's change it to something slightly different. Now I'm sending all these things down. It actually is going to update them. It's going to update title to Bugs Bunny and network to Warner's Burgers. They happen to be the same thing, but it doesn't really matter. Now I run into a 404 error. And the reason is because in my router, I forgot to put that :ID for the route parameters. Time for a quick break, but I feel like I'm so close to the end. I'm going to take a little bit more time to do this. Then I'm going to go take a nice long break. And here we go. Notice how it moved to the bottom. So I didn't have any order by or anything else to make sure they were ordered by the ID. It's actually ordering by when they were created or updated. So it's not required in this assignment to do a patch route, but I decided that this next one I'm going to do is going to be a patch. The idea behind a patch is instead of having to send everything in, I'm going to send a patch request to the appropriate URL, so /API/cartoons/ like 1, let's say, for the Bugs Bunny one, but I'm only going to put one of the fields that I want to update. And then Connects is going to be smart in updating a specific thing. Now, I wasn't completely sure if the update route, if the update object or function on Connects would do what I wanted to do. So I'm coming to look to see if there is a patch ID here. Like, for example, maybe modify would be what I wanted. But it's not exactly what I wanted to have. So I'll go back and take a look at update, see whether or not it's truly atomic or not. And one thing that I notice here is it says, if a key to be updated has value undefined, it is ignored, which tells me, okay, if I just don't send those keys, it won't touch them at all, which suddenly makes it not an atomic update, but a more sort of laser-focused update. So the code for this ends up being almost exactly the same. In fact, we're even going to use the db.update function because it's doing the type of thing we want. I'm just also adding this in here for the patch. That way, everything we want to do is right where we want it to be. Now, initially I was thinking, okay, I can write a different patch one, but when I go to write that one in queries, I realize it's going to be the exact same thing. So I end up making it the same update function. And then maybe later on in the future, if I decide to use a different function inside of connects, or I write this to be differently here, I could just rewrite it and just change the reference to it inside the route. So then we'll go test this out to see if I just change one aspect but not send everything out, it should just be fine and be exactly the same. So we'll change the year again. But we'll ignore and not send in the title and network, so 2001 this time. Also, it looks like as I send that request, I forgot to change it over to patch. Now the final route here, because we've done the C, the R, and the U, the D. The delete is always really interesting here. It's because deleting is so dangerous for a database. Also, the delete keyword is a real thing in JavaScript. So most applications or most software does not want to use delete. However, the author of Express was not one of those people. So we have to do router.delete in order to catch that HTTP keyword. However, I was not so confident in that inside of my code, so I called the function remove inside of the queries. I also wanted to really quickly check out what HTTP status codes for delete are there. Is there a specific one like 201 for create? Now the closest one that we could find, I believe, is 204, which is no body being sent back. No content. But reading through that, I decided that I didn't really want to fully use that. I decided, okay, I'm just going to send back the generic 200, which is just okay. In general, 200 is a good status code. It's just the generic one. It doesn't really provide much meaning besides, oh, it worked. Now, connects is the exact same feelings on the delete keyword as many other developers. So they also do not have a .delete, but rather they have a .del. And this is the most important part, the where. If you forget this, it's going to delete every row in your database. So let's delete Bugs Bunny. I've already sort of messed with bugs here, so we might as well reset it. We'll remove it completely from the database. I get that 200 back, and I'm going to do my get all just to verify. Is bugs still in here? And it's not. ID1 is gone. And I'm actually going to go and double check. Nope, not there at all. So with that being done, these are all the routes for CRUD. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time on the next assignment.